Government reviews socio-economic development. And later on, Vietnam, attractive destination for foreign investment. Hello there, you're tuning into BizLine, our weekly economic journal on VTV International. I'm Hoàng Hằng, and as usual, we now take a look at news making headlines in Vietnam's economic scene in the past week.
Vietnam's socio-economic situation shows signs of improvement. Several important economic indicators, such as retail sales of consumer goods and services, industrial production and exports, increased in May. However, the government, along with local authorities, need to keep their determination to continue solving difficulties due to COVID-19. This was requested by Prime Minister Nguyễn Phúc at the government's May regular meeting on Tuesday. The Minister of Industry and Trade reported that it will continue to boost pork imports and also set up an inspection team to further assess the role of major livestock enterprises, especially in the intermediary stage. Meanwhile, according to the Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, along with importing 94,000 breeding pigs and live pigs, it is expected that the pork supply across the country in the next 2 months would be the same as before the African swine fever outbreak.
Industrial production in May increased much higher than April, up 11.2%. In May, the export turnover was estimated to reach $18.5 billion, up 5.2% compared to April. Total retail sales of consumer goods and services in May was estimated at $16.6 billion, up 26.9% over the previous month. Construction investment activities have returned to normal state. Regarding the progress of supporting policies, the Minister and Chairman of the Office of the Government, Mai Tiến-dũng, said that up to now, the total amount of money to support those affected by COVID-19 pandemic is about $755 million.
On Wednesday, Deputy Prime Minister Vũ Đức Đam attended a working session with the Vietnam National Administration of Tourism, the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism, and businesses to discuss restoring the tourism industry post-COVID-19. The Deputy Prime Minister stressed that the most important goal now is to maintain operations for 42,000 tourist agencies to avoid bankruptcy, or else it would take many years for the country's tourism industry to recover. Regarding international tourists, he said the country will only reopen when all conditions are safe, with strict entry procedures in plan. He also tasked the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism and the Ministry of Information and Communication to create a promotional campaign to spread a strong message about the country's attractiveness and safety as a travel destination to international tourists.
The Ministry of Transport plans to repair and upgrade the taxiways and runways of Nội Bài and Tân Sơn Nhất airports by the end of June. Prime Minister Nguyễn Phúc agreed to let the ministry hire contractors to repair the runways instead of holding a tender process. The Ministry of Transport has set up a plan to assign Thăng Long Project Management Board and Cửu Long Corporation as the contractors of the project. The total investment required to renovate and upgrade the runways and taxiways of the two airports is estimated to be about $186 million. The first taxiways and runways of Nội Bài and Tân Sơn Nhất Airport are expected to be completed by the end of this year. After that, the remaining taxiway and runway will be closed for maintenance and is expected to be completed by 2021.
Vietnam's rice exports have been increasing due to strong demand from the Philippines, Malaysia and China. The total volume and value of rice exports in the first 5 months of this year have reached nearly 2.9 million tons and $1.41 billion, an increase of 5.1% in volume and nearly 19% in value compared to the same period in 2019. The Philippines ranks first in Vietnam's rice export market with more than 40% market share. The markets that have strong increases in rice export value are China and Indonesia, followed by Taiwan, China.
It is expected that at the beginning of this June, the People's Committee of Lục Ngạn District will establish an online trading platform for lychee, bringing the Lục Ngạn lychee to the online markets for the first time to diversify its sales channels to domestic and foreign markets. Using an e-commerce platform and promoting lychee products to the Singapore markets are two of many solutions Bắc Giang Province has implemented to facilitate the consumption of lychee amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Although Singapore is a potential market for Vietnamese lychee products are mainly exported to Singapore via Chinese traders. Therefore, it is very important to directly introduce Bắc Giang lychees to Singapore's markets, paving the way for the other key agricultural products of the province.
Those are some highlights in Vietnam's economic scene in the past week. Up next in our crosstalk, we will take a look at Vietnam's investment opportunities through the eyes of foreign investors. Global economy is at a standstill as the world takes an aggressive stand to cope with COVID-19, and that is having a broad impact on investment activities. Despite that, in the first 5 months of 2020, Vietnam received $7.44 billion of new registered foreign direct investment and is considered as one of the best positioned in the global supply chain post-COVID-19. In today's edition of BizLine, let's learn more about investment opportunities in Vietnam through the eyes of foreign investors. But first, let's take a look at the foreign investment activities in Vietnam in the following clip.
Expanding hundreds of hectares of land, investing in modern warehouses, and improving major road infrastructures. This is the way Hai Son Industrial Park investors in Long An Province catch up with shifting of global supply chains. They have welcomed 10 additional investors to this industrial park post-COVID-19.
Đầu tư san lấp mặt bằng và đầu tư các hạng mục trục đường giao thông, hệ thống điện cũng như hệ thống xử lý nước thải hoàn thiện để sắp tới chúng tôi sẽ đón nhận các nhà đầu tư.
Ho Chi Minh City is still number one among southern localities when it comes to attracting foreign investment, with 369 projects in the first quarter of 2020. This shows that Vietnam has gradually become an ideal destination for investors from the US, South Korea, Japan, and Singapore.
We hope industrial parks would improve their infrastructure related to power supply. They must be able to respond quickly when problems arise, especially those related to information transfers and IT infrastructures.
Experts have said that to welcome the new wave of investment, Vietnam needs to ensure a transparent investment environment, build a logistics system, and give priority to fields such as technology, electronics, and energy. This will help reassure foreign investors and attract high-quality FDI into the country.
To give audiences a better look at the foreign investor view on Vietnam, we invited to our studio today Ms. Virginia Phut, Chair of AmCham Vietnam and also President and CEO of Bay Global Strategies LLC. Well, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here.
Well, first of all, how did COVID-19 affect investing activities around the world?
Well, I think we're still seeing that. I'm not sure we can reach big conclusions yet. But certainly the economies globally have either slowed down dramatically, come to a stop, and we're trying to figure out how openings happen. Vietnam has been probably the most successful country globally, and therefore, you know, systems are open again, businesses are open again, and cautiously, we are very optimistic about what's going to happen in Vietnam.
Vietnam has successfully contained the disease and now focuses on economic recovery. What does this mean to investors?
I think it means a couple things. One is, even in the beginning period of COVID, Vietnam was very good at first closing down the supply chain to be cautious, but then was very strategic and successful in how the supply chain opened back up. So businesses were only affected for a brief period of time, and that was very impressive for companies, that Vietnam was able to open the supply chain. I think it means that companies will look to Vietnam, that how Vietnam handled COVID itself, how it handled the supply chains, the stimulus package and the government's plans for helping the unemployed and tax relief and all the programs are also very impressive and show a government that is really interested in attracting FDI and the growth of the domestic economy overall. Now, we should all knock on wood because anything can happen. This is a disease and a virus that is contagious, went around the world very quickly, it could come back.
There's no vaccine for it yet?
There's no vaccine for it yet. There's no medical treatment to make it less painful and less harmful and less lethal. But I think those of us who live here have great confidence in, if it circles back and comes back to Vietnam, I think we all know what to do. The Vietnamese people know what to do. The government knows what to do. There's a plan, there's a system. So we have tremendous confidence in Vietnam's being able to handle a catastrophe. Now, no government wants to be handling catastrophe, but FDI does want to see political stability, competent government, the ability to handle a disaster, storms, typhoons, because these things happen. So you want to feel that you're in a country that has a system and an ability to really deal with it. And Vietnam was #1 globally on COVID. That's amazing.
Vietnam has recently witnessed a new wave of foreign direct investment as companies decided to relocate their factories to Vietnam or look for new suppliers here. For example, in the first 4 months of 2020, U.S. investor purchased $68.6 million of stock in Vietnam, despite the adverse effect of COVID-19. So what could be the driving force behind this, in your opinion?
Well, I think that some of it is, as we said, the good reputation that Vietnam has developed for how it can handle disasters like COVID, the trade wars. But also, I think it's an indication that companies are looking for places to invest. There's always an interest in new markets, new supply chains. The Vietnamese consumer is increasingly interesting for FDI. So I think Vietnam's reputation just continues to get better, and that attracts FDI.
After 40 years in Thailand, Panasonic is planning to move its factory to Vietnam this September. A representative of Panasonic Vietnam said that is part of the company's new product development strategy, which involves looking for new areas with promising potential.
Vietnam and Japan has a good relationship and a very good market in terms of manufacturing as well as the domestic promising in terms of both export and the domestic market.
The South Korean textile business, due to the impact of coronavirus outbreak, has decided to move 10% of its material input to Vietnam.
And we are more than happy to work with them and develop new product and make it into higher standard quality.
COVID-19 pandemic has forced many manufacturers to re-evaluate their supply chain strategy. Multinational corporations are putting their manufacturing facilities in several countries. Vietnam, with several advantages, rose as an attractive destination.
Can we be a little bit more specific about the FDI that coming into Vietnam? What are the sectors, do you think, that attract the most FDI in recent months?
Well, I think that's a little bit hard to anticipate. I know that the government very much wants greater value add, so that not just sort of low-end manufacturing, but to increase in areas where skilled labor, engineers, increasing value add by domestic players can be brought in. So I think that means probably more electronics. FDI is coming in energy. There is a lot of interest in Vietnam's efforts for clean energy. and as we call circular economy, to get into recycling and other areas to help have a cleaner environment. There are a lot of jobs that can be created through clean energy and clean environment. There are infrastructure projects that are very interesting, particularly for American companies. And then manufacturing across the board. The largest exports of Vietnam are electronics, textile and apparel, footwear, seafood products, agricultural products. All of those areas are of interest to foreign investors who believe they can help Vietnam add more value to those exports. So it's not just raw materials, but it's branded coffee or branded cashews and branded seafood, and put a little more of the made in Vietnam label on the products when they get exported.
Now, recent data show that the US is one of the top 10 foreign investors in Vietnam, with total registered capital of more than 9.3 billion US dollars. So what do you think is Vietnam's most attractive element to investors in general and also US investors as well?
So I think the U.S. numbers we always complain about, because some of our investors come through their subsidiaries in Singapore or other countries, and so the numbers seem lower than they actually are. But I think the great successes have been in, well, in a range of things. As I said, in energy, footwear. A lot of our clothing companies in the U.S. and big brands have buy extensively from Vietnam. And I think that's one area that we are worried about, that the U.S. market looks like it's going to have, or the U.S. economy is going to have a more difficult end of the year. Consumer product purchasing may go down. And what impact will that have for Vietnamese exports? We are a bit worried about that if the Vietnamese exports come down because the U.S. market is lower, that's obviously very hard on the companies here in Vietnam. And I think we will look at what's happening in the European Union and the Japanese markets. Where are the economic forecasts looking less optimistic? The opportunities here. The market is almost 100 million Vietnamese now, who are shopping like the rest of the world and interested in travel. And I think American companies see that the Vietnamese population is an important market for them as well.
Which sector is currently the most appealing to US investors?
Well, I don't know that I can pick one. I think the way to look at it is if all the sectors in the Vietnamese economy, from, as I said, energy, infrastructure, manufacturing, light manufacturing, heavy manufacturing, exports, domestic, there's an investor or two or three in all of them that is from the United States. So it's our membership at AmCham is a very diverse group of companies in services, in banking, in insurance, in legal talent, accounting firms. So a lot in soft infrastructure services and a lot in hard infrastructure and manufacturing. I think we have somebody in everything in Vietnam.
Now, does the U.S. government have a set of priorities for them to push for investment, U.S. investment into Vietnam?
There are several U.S. government agencies, the DCF and the Export-Import Bank, which can help U.S. companies who are looking to sell product in Vietnam or looking to invest or need insurance. It's more the big projects. I think that some of the projects that are looking to come to Vietnam, the financing of aircraft, for example, when Vietnam Airlines and Vietjet and Bamboo have all been looking at U.S. airlines, there is help in the U.S. government for those sales. There's help for energy projects. There is help if you need to do a feasibility study. You can get help from the U.S. government. Education projects have been getting help with feasibility studies. The Fulbright University in Ho Chi Minh City, which is getting help from the U.S. government, and the Vietnamese government. So it's sort of a joint venture between the two governments with money and support on both sides.
This Taiwan-based factory is the supplier of all headphone products for international tech giants such as Samsung and LG. In order to meet demands and international standards, the factory has produced 1,000 robots. All of them were designed by Vietnamese engineers.
We've organized facilities for research on product development. The facilities are headed by advanced automation engineers who were recruited from specialized departments of Taiwan University. However, we still need more advanced workers to produce raw materials and high-tech products.
To attract high-value FDI projects and absorb advanced technology, enterprises need advanced labor forces. Therefore, many localities have linked the training of workers to the requirements of FDI enterprises.
Sự phối hợp chặt chẽ giữa các doanh nghiệp FDI đối với trực tiếp các cơ sở đào tạo trên địa bàn đều tổ chức cái kế hoạch rồi để tổ chức ký kết các cái chương trình hợp tác theo đúng cái nhu cầu. Sự lớn lên ngay chính các cái doanh nghiệp của địa phương của chúng ta phải nhanh chóng để tiếp cận được, đáp ứng được cái việc tiếp thu các cái công nghệ tiên tiến và đáp ứng được là những cái doanh nghiệp vệ tinh, những cái vendor để cung cấp cho họ.
In FDI enterprises, up to 37% of laborers haven't met these standards, and 40% of enterprises are facing a labor shortage. It takes 2 years for many companies to retrain workers.
We're using our own technology. We're using 5G technology to automate the factory floor in order to be able to manufacture Ericsson's 4G and 5G base stations in a factory that is enabled by 5G technology. So that it allows for cloud robotics, of course, artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data analytics, virtual reality.
International investors are restructuring and relocating their supply chains. This can be an opportunity for high-tech Vietnamese products. The quality of the labor force needs to improve to attract more international investments in the future.
25 years has passed since the normalization of trade and diplomatic relations between Vietnam and the U.S. We have achieved great results, however, it hasn't matched its potential. So do you have any suggestion for Vietnam to improve its competitiveness and attract more foreign investors?
I think the biggest challenge is, getting the systems in place. And this is very difficult for all governments. Companies want to see e-government, e-banking, e-communications, quick. And that is a challenge for governments globally. There was a very interesting story during the early days of COVID that the Japanese system is still very much based on the fax machine. Well, in the United States, nobody has faxes anymore. Okay. So it's this kind of having business tools, I would say, be usable in government as well. And if those things, we always talk about the 5G systems, the next generation of technology and innovation. Industry 4.0, the next generation of services and banking, and most Americans don't go to their bank anymore. It's all done online or at ATM machines. That's happening here, but I think the speed with which that is happening globally is something we need to be very careful and watch for. All the IT, cloud computing, all of this is very important in how companies choose where they're going to locate. Investors look for both procedural issues, such as how easy is it to do business, how easy is it to register, pay your taxes, all the administrative issues. Vietnam gets a not very high mark on that. Okay. The burden on companies, domestic and foreign. This is not unique, but we at AmCham have been working with the government on how to streamline some of those procedures so that the ease of doing business increases, because it is a very competitive region, and companies have choices. So they can choose Vietnam or they can choose not to come to Vietnam. So it's an increasingly competitive area. So companies look for the ease of doing business. They look for talented labor. That's another area that we think Vietnam needs to increase the training of Vietnamese workers, and to train more engineers and sort of the higher end educational programs. So one of the things that we have worked on is to what we call in the US vocational schools. So training schools that really focus on IT, engineering, all the backbone industries for making the industry 4.0 and 5G, and this will require clean energy, clean water. All of these will require a level of skill sets that requires training at the university level. Some of this can be done with talented high school graduates. Companies do a lot of training, and that's been quite successful. But there comes a point when the school system is going to need to produce more energetic, talented, but better trained labor force. And I know there's a great effort on this, and the Vietnamese labor force, it has a very high reputation. We all are very pleased with our staff and with the labor force, and that's one of the areas that Vietnam has been very successful in attracting and keeping investment, is the talent in the labor force. So now we just need to increase the experience and the opportunity a bit.
Well, once again, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here.
Prime Minister Nguyễn Xuân Phúc has decided to set up a special working group on boosting post-pandemic foreign investment flows, mainly from multinational and high-tech corporations that lead the global supply chains. This is one of Vietnam's proactive measures to effectively take advantage of the investment and contribute to the country's economic development in the future. And that also wraps up this edition of BizLine. In the meantime, you can log on to our official website at vtv4.vtv.vn or visit our YouTube channel at VTV4Go. Goodbye for now, and thanks for tuning in. Okay, thank you, Virginia.
Thank you.